We've got yet another workflow library to talk about, and that's called ZooKeeper. And if you guessed, it's for all the animals in the zoo, like the pig and all those other animals, you'd be right. I don't know who makes up all these Apache names, but they do have kind of a weird sense of humor. So what is ZooKeeper? It's a centralized service for Hadoop configuration information. Well, that's a lot of words, but what does that mean? What do you use it for? It allows for distributed applications. It creates an ensemble of applications. So again, it's used as a coordination service for large enterprise Hadoop projects. ZooKeeper is part of some vendor distributions. It's part of the Cloudera distribution, and we're going to be taking a look at it in just a couple of minutes. Why would you use ZooKeeper? The most common use case is for distributed in-memory computation. What kind of business scenarios support distributed in-memory computation? Well, one of them would be ad serving. So you'd want to capture behavioral information, say about what someone was doing in an online game, and then you'd want to serve up ads based on what they're playing in the game. So how does it work? There's some data that's shared between the client nodes, and you really care about data synchronization. If people are playing the game and they're in a certain room and there's a certain type of item in the room, you want to show them that ad for that item when you see that their mouse moves on it, not 5 minutes later. That's not going to be relevant. So data synchronization matters. Now, there are a number of utility objects in ZooKeeper, locking, synchronization, queues, and other types of objects that help you to set this data synchronization up more easily. As with some of the other libraries we've talked about in this section, setting up ZooKeeper and getting it to work properly is pretty complex. You have to configure it correctly, and you've heard me say this a couple of times, but it's just as important here. It needs to be tested with production-level workloads. A common situation I see in working with new enterprise Hadoop customers is they test with just too small of an amount of data, they push to production, and then they haven't either configured or optimized correctly, and they get into trouble. So hopefully you'll avoid that. As with some of these libraries that I've talked about in this section, they look a little rough around the edges, and that's because, remember, the Hadoop ecosystem is pretty new. So there's a whole group of vendors out there that are providing alternatives that you have to buy that have a higher level of sophistication. So in general, but particularly with ZooKeeper, what I often see is enterprises will start with ZooKeeper because it's free and it's included as part of the Hadoop distribution for most vendors automatically. And they'll try it out and kind of see how it works. And then either they'll go with it or they will purchase a third-party product. So ones that I'm familiar with are Open Replica and something called Doozer. The names crack me up.